It's actually been very, very interesting recently, hasn't it? It's been quite volatile, and I like Marty's comment about don't being afraid to actually not trade. I think that's actually really important. Obviously, I must have known something. And I've actually had a little bit too much to do with Shakespeare recently, so the trade or not to trade. So I think like it's more about sometimes the best thing you can do for your trading is to do nothing at all. Anyone else have an opinion on that?
Absolutely correct. Not losing money is winning money. That's correct.
Yes, absolutely. And it's also that psychological, emotional thing as well, because while you're losing money, you're losing faith.
Correct.
So I see, because I do a lot of research into my master classes and everything I do, because I do like to make sure that as much as possible I have things as accurate as I can, as well as my own personal strategies and my own personal trading psychology sort of good. So as we all know though, attitude, awareness, and action are pretty much the keys to any trading. So it's our attitude towards loss, the attachment to the outcome or what the outcome gives to us, and our expectations versus our reality, what we're thinking it's going to give us versus what it actually does. When we look at our awareness, we're looking at ourself, our awareness of the market, and all of the different influences that actually create what we are doing and how we are doing it. So ourselves personally, our social environment, how we were raised, our culture, everything that goes into that. And when I talk about our capacity and our capability, that's what we are able to do. So not necessarily what we want to do. It's not what we should or could. It's what we can and will. And how much we can control versus how much we believe we can or we want to. Because reality is the most important part. So the framework that I like to use is when we look at, we have intent. So what we intend to get out of it, what we intend to do to get that, which is, again, our reality. So our strategic intent is our direction, our expectation, and what we are prepared to do to actually get the goal that we want. So, we have 2 open trades. I'm at my maximum. I'm not going to go any further. We have our knowledge. Now, knowledge is the information we have. It's what we learn from people like Partha, from Marty, whoever you've got there to actually ask questions. So that's our structure, setup, rules, tools. It's where our capability comes from, and that's where we check and create our intent, how we intend to do things. So at the moment, the market is extremely volatile. So do we reduce position sizes? Do we adjust or adapt our strategy, or do we just step back and not do anything? Our tolerance, which is actually a really important thing, and I think Ben definitely talked about tolerance last time, and I think Kim may have as well. Our tolerance is what helps us stick to our strategy when there is uncertainty and pressure and a lot of volatility. It's uncertainty, pressure is not something that our body likes physiologically. So we tend to have a bad reaction to that, which creates a lot of trading problems. It's a matter of finding the difference between whether you're in actual danger or whether you're just under pressure. So are you actually in danger? Is there an issue, or do you just feel like there is? And I think one of the most important ones is wisdom. And wisdom is that experience, that reflection and the insight. It's looking at context. as well. So if you're, and I am, since Ben's actually gone through that prop trading audition and all of those things, it's really shown me how different the audition is, especially from the live trading, because with the audition, you definitely have a specific goal with a specific amount, and you have an attachment to that. Whereas you have to also be in the same frame of mind that you don't have an attachment and you don't have a goal as a specific amount. So it's a context of what you're doing in any one time that can muddy the waters and make things a little bit different or difficult. Okay, my little turtle friend here. One of the things that I've actually found that I really, really love is this quote, is every trader should love their losses. You should love everything about your approach, your wins, your losses, and the percentage that every trade gives back. So really, it sort of goes without saying that if you love your losses and you're happy to accept everything that comes with that, then there is no problem with anything that you do. It just is what it is. That's one of my favorite sayings. I'm pretty sure my kids hate me. Does
This
anyone
is
have any questions up
this is a
until now?
good one. This is a good one from our old friend Richard Dennis.
It's actually, it is a really good one, and I love that. And it's not, you can adapt that to pretty much any situation because it is what it is. So for me, I believe tolerance is the key. Tolerance is, I'm going back to my foundations here in actually looking at it from more than just a trading psychology point of view. So it's an actual neurological process. So it's what causes a problem is a conflict between our thoughts and our emotions. Do I want to do that? How do I feel about that? It's an outcome of a process in the brain and the body that's influenced by our psychology, our physiology, our understanding of things. It's a complete process, and I won't go into the parts of the brain because we just don't want to know. It's fluid, it's individual, there's no one moment where it is the same. It depends on different circumstances with you. It depends on circumstances with how much it means to you. It's not the same with anybody, and it's not the same in any one moment, which is what actually makes it so difficult. It's the bridge between our attitude and our action. When we are able to tolerate our attitude, we can do what we need to do. Viktor Frankl being another person that is somebody that's actually been a pretty big influence in my life, says that if you know the why, then you can bear almost any how. And I think that that's really significant. It's how we interpret data and give it meaning based on our experience, which is very much our wisdom, where that wisdom comes in. And it's our activation point for our actual trading. It's where a lot of our energy comes from. Do we trade or do we not trade? And I think that is the question, I suppose. So if we look at tolerance from a psychological point of view, we're looking at a psychological tolerance. So how much we can handle of uncertainty, frustration, our expectation of outcome, and our conflict. And I will go into conflict in a minute because that is pretty significant as well. With biological, it's how much stress we can handle, what sort of sensations in our body we can handle, how tired we are when we can finally break and can't do it anymore, how much sensory input you can handle, because there's a lot of people who just get to that sensory overload, can't do it anymore. And also our chemical. So, you could have that adrenal fatigue where you've had so much stress that you just can't do it anymore. Everything just shuts down. For identity. So how important is it for you to succeed? How much can you handle of a loss before you actually feel like a failure and you shut down. Authenticity is how much does it need? Do you need to feel like this is yours? You identify with it, you own it. And your responsibility is what you are willing to accept as your responsibility and not the market, or not try and blame somebody else. So with performance, so how much noise, how much of the volatility are we willing to accept and tolerate before we can't do it anymore? Are we able to handle boredom, or do we just sort of like all of a sudden start clicking the mouse because we've got nothing better to do? Our process, how much can we follow our process, and how much variance can we handle? And I say that because that's in everyday life as well. I know that, my daughters would follow a routine to a point and then go, I'm bored. I don't want to follow that anymore. As far as social is concerned, it's how much can we handle with comparison. So us comparing ourselves, but also other people comparing us. The expectations of others and the expectations of ourselves. How much conformity can we buck up and do our own thing, or do we need to follow others? Do we feel like we need to, which, the FOMO type thing? And can we handle feedback? People tend to not be able to handle that feedback without being defensive, without that knee-jerk reaction of needing to defend themselves. And our financial, so how much risk and how much loss can we handle? What sort of drawdown can we handle? And I know this sounds really strange, but profit. How much profit can we handle? And that's like, sometimes there's that fear of success as much as there is this fear of failure. So if we have tolerance as the key, so what sort of things can help us identify? So I think a really big thing is letting winning trades run. That fear that you're going to end up losing out, so you're better off just cutting your losses and go straight away. Holding on to something that's a losing trade. Missing signals on a chart. You just get to that point where you're so shut down that you just actually don't see it at all. You trade to meet the expectations that you have of yourself and others have of you. So you just keep going because you think, oh, well, if I keep going, this next trade will be the winner and I'll be fine. Copying other traders without understanding it is a really, really big thing that I have found with different clients that I've had and different people, and not just traders, but it's seeing that other person and going, oh, that looks great, I'm going to try that, and not actually understanding why they're doing it. And because you don't understand the why, you can't adapt and adjust. So exiting as a reaction to the market noise and volatility, and that's a really big thing at the moment as well. When you actually start, making losses or things like that, you can actually start making an overcomplicated strategy, and you can actually forget that it could actually be that just market noise. It could be just the market is really unpredictable at the moment, which it is. It's pretty insane. It has been pretty insane. You can adjust. So there is a difference between adjusting and adapting. Adjusting is just continually changing your strategy. Adapting is obviously adapting to the market that's there at the moment and changing what needs to be changed. It could be that you're like using a 5-minute chart or a 1-day chart or a 4-hour chart, and you adapt based on the chart that you're using. Knowing when to stop trading or not to trade at all, not to take a trade, know when to just step back and say, nah, it's not a good time. Knowing that quantity does not guarantee profit. Just because you're trading more doesn't mean you're going to win more. Misinterpreting charts and data. So if you look at something, you might see something that you go, oh yeah, that's a great signal, I'm going to take that trade, but you've missed something completely. And using a gut feeling to resolve an internal conflict, and I will go through conflict in a minute. So tolerance loop being the process, which is what I was talking about, being more physiological. So before I go any further, does anyone have any questions?
Please ask all your questions to Kerry. This is your chance.
Okay. So we're looking at tolerance as a loop and a psychological and neurological concept. So we are looking at how we manage the physical, emotional, psychological, and social pressures that come with our trading. It's about being and maintaining awareness of the market and ourselves, staying engaged so we don't just shut off, we don't just go on autopilot. We actually are able to stop and stay long enough to think logically and actually have strategy and be able to act on strategy. It's pausing, so you don't do that whole click without thinking. And it's about, great spelling there, it's about process over outcome. So it's loving your strategy. It's not worrying about what outcomes are there, it's just loving your strategy. So when we get signals, it's using the right skills in the right way at the right time and have no expectations of the result. And I think that's a pretty good way of being able to do a sustainable and successful trading career. So if we look at our data, it's the data that comes in. So sensory and somatic. So somatic being our actual senses that we have of our body itself, not necessarily from the external environment. We also have our environment. So what are we, temperature, it could be all sorts of different things in our environment. It's the charts, it's everything that we are experiencing, every piece of data that may come into our existence at that time while we were sitting there trading. It's meaning, so what meaning we give to that data. So do we physically react to it as an emotion? What sort of cognitive meaning do we give that? How do we associate that with your intent, with your knowledge? What emotion you put with that, whether it's a threat, whether it's not a threat. How does that relate to your goal and situation as it is, as the context? So the relevance, again, context, it's a context to this situation in this moment to you. So it's right now where you are in this market with these charts, the way you are and what market you're looking at. So I know that that sounds like repeating, but it's like, are you looking at Forex? Are you looking at commodities? What are you looking at, and what is the market, and what are the people who are trading that? What are they thinking? What is the psychology of them in particular, not everybody in the world? And that is something that actually is quite difficult sometimes for people to grasp, is that you're not looking at everybody, you're looking at that particular market. Value. So how much does it matter? What sort of importance does that particular thing have? How much significance does it have to your goal and what matters to you? What impact does it have on your outcome in this particular situation? Because it can change. The same thing can change with a different situation for a different outcome that you might have. So the conflict is the gatekeeper. It looks at threat. It helps you figure out options and work out the resolution to all of those problems. And then we have our threat, is whether we can use our strategy, whether we go into that stress response, whether we go into the threat response, how do we process and remember that information for later use? Does anyone have any questions? No? Okay, so obviously our processing. So I was talking about conflict. So I believe that conflict is the key to our tolerance. It's where our intent, our knowledge, and wisdom influence our actions. How do those things work together to allow us to do what we need to do strategically rather than reacting emotionally? So I don't know if anyone's experienced it, but it's like the two sides of your brain are fighting. It's like you've got that argument happening in your head. Do I do this or not? So if we look at that, so we have the trade or not trade, should versus can. Should I do this? And can I do that? Because I think everybody does that in every aspect of their life. They have that, I should do this, but I just don't have the energy or I just don't have the time. It's that internal sense, that internal feeling versus what you see externally or what other people expect. It's just, you know what other people expect, but you just perhaps can't give them that. What you want to do, what you want to achieve, what you want to give, but what the actual actions are that you are able to do. What we expect versus what the reality is that occurs, regardless of what you want to happen, what you believe should happen. That's just not reality, and it's very rare that those two meet. Thinking and feeling. We can think that a trade is amazing and we can think that it's a great setup, but there's something inside us, there's that feeling that it doesn't feel right. Which do we do? And it's our capabilities, our capacities. So if we look at that 3V model that I was just mentioning, I mentioned before, it looks at the value, vulnerability, and the volatility. So how much it means to us, how uncertain it is, and how much control we have or how much it's likely to end up the way we want it to end up. And that's what causes a large part of that volatility. There's part of us that knows what reality is, but there's another part of us that doesn't really want to believe that. So we just keep hoping. So we can get that conflict overload. And it is unresolvable conflict, but you keep trying. So it's that conflict that you feel in your brain, it just can't let go of. It just keeps going around and around in circles. It just keeps going. After a while, that unresolved conflict then becomes a threat. We actually start seeing that as a threat. So if you're trading 1% of your capital, your body starts to see it as like 10% because the threat is so exaggerated and so over the top that it's just out of proportion now, and you start to react accordingly.
This slide is so good. The two sides of the brains are fighting always, and more in trading.
I think it's for everything.
Yeah, absolutely. In
I
everything.
know I feel like the two sides of my brain are fighting. Actually, that the two sides of your brain are fighting is actually something that my girls told me. And you know, when you look at that, it's trade not to trade. When these are the things that are the conflicts that affect us the most. When you relive a trade and you constantly are thinking about what you could have done, what you should have done, what you didn't do, would that have changed anything? And you just can't let it go. When you second guess, it's feeling like it would have been different. What if? I love what if. Everyone looks at what if. And I personally like, is news relevant? So I think some people look at the news and they see part of the news but they don't actually see all of the news. And I actually say that because my daughter, my 17-year-old daughter, actually picked what happened with United Healthcare in America. And if anyone's interested, I'm more than happy to tell you her logic later on. But it's incredible how she came up with this. And I wish we had have actually done something about it, but we didn't. Again, second guessing, what if? So conflict overload. There is almost a time frame for this. We can actually pin it down neurologically based on scans. So at 5 seconds, so we actually in our brain recognize a conflict within about 3 milliseconds, but we don't actually become consciously aware of it until about 5 seconds. So this is not like a hard and fast rule. This is just like, I suppose, an average. At 1 minute, it starts to become a threat. We start to get that stress response, tension. We start to feel it, but at the same time, our trading is not compromised at all. At 3 to 10 minutes, the stress response actually starts. So it can actually improve our trading, but at the same time, it can actually start to influence, and we can actually start to make more rash decisions that aren't very helpful. 10 to 20 minutes, that transition, that stress starts to actually transition to the threat. So now we're thinking that this is a threat to our lives. This is like, we are really, amygdala's coming in, we're starting to be hijacked. 20 minutes, we are fully hijacked. We have nothing. We are nothing but pure reaction. That's it, done.
I have a question here, Kerry.
Yeah.
How do I go back to your previous one if you can?
Yep. Yep.
What to do, or how to stop when aware of conflict is becoming a threat? So how to stop that?
That's coming.
Thank you.
You're a bit ahead, but it's coming.
Thank you.
All right. So, and this is something that I've heard so many times, not necessarily this in particular, but it's, if you spend all week thinking about the one day you've got a week that you can trade, you're compromised before you even start, because you've spent all of that week in conflict about what you can, what you can't, what you should, what you shouldn't, all week. It could be that you might trade only at particular times at one night. Like you might say, wake up in the middle of the night so you can trade the opening of the US market. There's a part of you that's thinking, I'm so tired, I've been working all day, I can't do this, but I've got to do this, so I'm okay. Conflict, you're done. You're already compromised before you get up, before you even start. That is the danger of the conflict. It is such an important thing that you need to look at and be aware of.
It is so well said again. This slide is fantastic again. Yeah, and the previous one. That is why we say, sorry, I need to say this. Yeah, sorry, I need to say this because we always say don't fall in love with any trade. A trade is a trade is a trade of the million trades you'll be taking in your lifetime.
Yes, you will always have, there will always be another trade.
Yeah.
You will not always have the same amount of capital.
Yeah. Many thanks.
So I love Derek Parker. He's my little turtle. And he has that sustainable, repeatable, growth-orientated trading. That's where he is. He's systematic, he's rule-based, he has a capacity in his portfolio, and he has a capability in his system. That's it, that's done. And really, that actually sounds like the perfect trading system. It sounds like everything's fine, and that actually just covers everything. But he actually, and in a number of his interviews, he actually uses the quote from Richard Dennis as a really big sticking point for him and something he keeps in mind all the time. He uses, and he has said that he uses the systematic rules with wise execution. And from what he has said, I see that he uses his intent of what he wants to achieve, what he intends to use, and how he wants to do it, which is his strategy, the knowledge that he has, how he needs to be able to maintain his composure, and experience that he has to be able to hold that together enough to do what he needs to do. And even though he doesn't use any sort of fundamentals, he uses rules, he uses strategy. He has also said in a number of interviews that sentiment, emotion, and news does not override the rules, but it changes the market that the rules apply to. And I think that that is something that a lot of people miss when they start following a completely rule-based system without actually understanding. And that's why understanding is so important. So we have the trading problems. That's fine. But those trading problems can be a part of so many different things. So how do we know if our issue is actually something to do with that tolerance loop? And that's looking at that physical, the somatic, the body sensory, and our perception of the different things. So like that's whether we see risk, how much we see risk, whether we interpret risk incorrectly. So at times when we actually have that conflict of do we trade or not trade, sometimes we actually trade, and we do that as a coping mechanism because we actually just can't handle the stress that comes with not trading. We, in all aspects of our life, we avoid conflict and discomfort. We don't like it, we don't do it, and that then transfers across to everything else, including our trading. When we have unresolved conflict, where if you have the two sides of your brain fighting way too much, then you're looking at having some issues with that tolerance process. And this one is an interesting one. Your brain cannot tell the difference between a physical pain and an emotional pain. And at times, if you are sensing an emotional pain or a pain to do with a trauma, it can actually represent as a physical pain. So if you start having pains while you're trading or whatever the case is, or when you're looking at your portfolio and you start getting pains that really there is no cause for physically, then it's something to actually look at. This one is really actually quite significant. I know that I actually have to myself really pay attention to this, is not noticing your body needs. I don't know how many people do it. I know I do. I can go a whole working day and go, oh, I forgot to eat today. Or I don't know when the last time was that I had a drink. And I've not noticed that I've been thirsty or hungry until all of a sudden it just hits me, and it's like an urgency of, holy crap, I've got to go, I've got to eat, I've got to do something, I feel faint. Has anyone else felt that when they've been trading?
Probably all of us.
And that's a really big danger sign, actually. And I think everyone does that sort of thing. So embodied awareness is something that is actually quite good. So we have embodied awareness and embodied wisdom. Our awareness is when we listen to the signs and we recognize them, the ones from our body, the ones that we're feeling, we interpret them. So not just as far as interpreting them as like, I feel hungry, but if you start feeling anxious, why am I feeling anxious right now? And if there's conflict there, how do we resolve that conflict? And how do we reframe our thoughts to be able to resolve that conflict before we get into that stage of it's a pure threat? So wisdom is when we start seeing it as a process, when we translate those sensations and those feelings into meaning, into action, into something more than just tension, just feeling sick, having a headache, and acting intentionally. So how is that going to work? And so I didn't know this, but did anyone else know that what George Soros's gut instincts and animal instincts were? And this is in a number of interviews that he's actually given. Was anyone else aware that that was actually what his gut instincts were?
So what does it mean? His gut instinct is
His
same as the
gut
animal instinct, is it?
his gut instinct is that he has gastro problems, and his animal instinct that he gets lower back pain.
Unbelievable.
And if it's he jokes about it and says that if it's his lower back, then he goes short. But that is actually what he calls his gut instinct and his animal instinct. I don't know, it's difficulty looking at him the same.
Yeah, I have recently come one new thing on George Soros is he is the I think third or fourth biggest philanthropist after JRD Tata and then Microsoft chairman Bill Gates, and George Soros is contributing a lot. But I have
And
one question. I have one question to you, Kerry.
yeah.
Tell me honestly on that human being where in which you have plotted so many things. How many minutes or hours you thought about it, or you really took to do this?
Sorry, I didn't hear that.
Top right hand picture. See the top right hand picture, the body of the human.
Yeah.
So many things are pointed in his hand and palm.
Mm.
Did you do it yourself? How good is that?
I did. But that they're all things that I know myself that I feel. So, I feel tingling in my hands. I do actually get joint pains. Your kidneys are actually where your adrenal glands are.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you can start feeling sick, quick breathing, or actually you start to hold your breath even.
My
Um,
goodness.
and I get tingly toes as well, which is really strange. But everyone is different though. They feel different things, and it's a matter of knowing yourself. One of my daughters actually has a spot on her head that she scratches, and if she gets really, really anxious, she can scratch it to the point where she actually ends up with like a bald spot. And that's
Holy.
before she even actually knows that she is anxious.
Every
So,
presentation you are making, every slide you are delivering, you are raising your bars. Unbelievable. This is fantastic. Thank you.
so overcoming the conflict. Here we go.
That's it.
So here's my little turtle again. So even though he's a strategic thinker, when Jerry's belief is when you love your losses and outcomes, you disarm the conflict. So there's no threat. It's just information. It's just, okay, I'd say itchy spot on my head, or I scratch my head, therefore I'm anxious. Why am I anxious? If you're George Soros and you have a sore back, literally he says if he gets a sore back or a gastro problem, he actually knows that there's something in his portfolio that he needs to address. If there's no threat, there's no fear. Then you just become a regulated, reflective decision maker with nothing to defend and no stress. He actually is really awesome that when he notices signs that his strategy doesn't suit the market, so when he actually starts feeling those signs within his body that things aren't going well, they don't match, they don't do the right thing, he actually says that he has a conversation with the charts and the markets, and he asks, what are you trying to tell me? And he stands back and he looks at things from a different angle. From what he
This
has
is
said, he
very important.
literally actually asks them.
This is extremely important. What are you trying to tell me? Market always tries to tell us something. This is
And
so.
the charts, because he is such a strategic, rule-based trader, what are those charts trying to tell me that I'm not seeing? So developing our tolerance loop. So it's building that awareness of our sensation and what causes those sensations. So stopping and thinking, okay, I'm feeling cold. Why am I feeling cold? Because like it's winter and I'm wearing shorts and a t-shirt. Like that's the cause. And we're not looking at just in trading. This is something that relates to everything, every aspect of your life. This is the way you are wired. So actually stopping and identifying what is fact, what is assumption, and what is a prediction, because sometimes we actually blur those lines and we start actually thinking that our assumptions and our predictions are fact when they're actually not. And although we can still use our assumptions and our predictions, we do need to realize and remember what they are. Being curious, asking questions, that is the biggest thing that makes our uncertainty actually acceptable, and we can actually digest it without feeling like it's a threat because we're actually curious all of a sudden. It's like a science experiment that we actually have then all of a sudden gone, oh, wow, that's really interesting. Let's go down there. I fall down so many rabbit holes. I've got so much useless information. It's just ridiculous. So also the important thing is asking yourself, is this a real threat or does it just feel like it is? Because sometimes it can feel so significant, but it's actually not.
Proven that 85% of our fear of false expectation of real thing, this does not happen. This is so true.
Yeah, absolutely. It's that we feel that it is. It's our evolution that we are constantly looking for threat because that's what we evolutionary are supposed to do. We look for threat. It's what we do after that that is important. We can't fight that we look for threat and that we acknowledge threat. We just have to know that it's here and then afterwards go, okay, yep, that's a possibility, but that's probably not going to happen right now. So what is the most logical option other than that? This one is actually, it sounds really weird, but it actually does work. Listening to music that is 50 to 80 beats per minute does actually change your brain waves and puts you in a zone where you are focused. You are not over or under, you're just being, if that makes sense. It's it's not one or the other. And when that music you start to actually hear it and it starts to become a conscious thought, that's time to stop trading or stop doing whatever you're doing because you're exhausted mentally. Creating controlled conflict and uncertainty. So find yourself a way of being able to create conflict and uncertainty where you feel safe and you're calm and controlled. Identify conflicts and strategies to start the resolution of the conflict. So when I was saying before about 20 minutes, and then comes a threat. If you actually have strategy that you can put in place to start resolving, then it's no longer a threat, or it's not as much of a threat because you actually have something that you're doing to resolve that. So then your body just chills out and says, okay, cool, I'm good now. And create a theory and investigate it. I love that. Be new, be different. There is the saying that who controls the past controls the future, and who controls the present controls the past. Don't necessarily rely on the old school ways of doing things. Go out there, create something new, see if it works. If it doesn't work, just try. Be new, expand. So developing tolerance in itself in your trading. So it's the awareness. So how can we do this in our trading? So we're looking at assessments, which I actually have, which are formal assessments that can give reports on how much you actually see of yourself and of your body. The framework, how do you fit into your framework? Are you using your wisdom and tolerance as well as your intent and knowledge? Is there that combination that's working well? I have would you rather activities. I don't know anyone who's got kids. You end up having to do this would you rather game. And I've actually made one that is specifically for trading. So, things like, would you rather enter a trade late or exit early? Even though you are, say, potentially going to lose the same amount of money or win the same amount, which one would you like? Because that will actually tell you a little bit about yourself. So there's those sorts of things that will give you an indication of where you are at in that whole picture, and then you can work on those things. Challenging. So again, creating the controlled situations, but doing it in a trading respect. So keeping in mind that these are psychological trading development. They're not like something that you go out there and you actually trade and expect to make money, or these are just like a suggested tool to develop your tolerance and your ability to let things run. So break-even challenge. So most people go into trading expecting that they're going to make money, they're going to do these things. To do something to break even though it's a safe thing, so I suggest don't do this live, by the way, do this backtesting demo or something like that. But making sure that if you do that break-even challenge, that you actually are, even though you're not doing it live, you're still actually going against what you're expecting and what you're wanting from trading. So you're actually causing a conflict and you're causing uncertainty and uncomfortable. And you're actually associating that with actually not having a problem and being okay. Having conflict and doing nothing about it, just letting it go. So your trading development strategies, again, another one of these, it's not something I suggest, people definitely do necessarily live, and it's not something that's a long-term thing, but it can help if you have an issue letting winning trades run, or if you get so freaked out by market noise and market volatility that you actually you just exit early. It's something that can help you do that without the fear of loss, which is a huge issue. It's the fear of loss. So that's where this love of loss strategy and return from trades come. So you can adjust your stop based on the market analysis, but I'm not talking about the whole trailing stop where you just adjust it and put it into the computer and let it run. I'm talking about you going in, you're looking at the market, you looking at where, if it was today, where would your stop be? And looking at those sorts of things and actually doing it consciously yourself when you go there. If you have that conflict, you do what you thought was right, hasn't worked out, go back test the alternative, the thing that was the conflict, but don't do it to beat yourself up over what you did wrong. Learn from what possibly could you have done better. Did you miss something, or was it just the market? Was it just something that was completely out of your control and there was nothing wrong? So working through the conflict, again, creating conflict but non-threatening, removing fear. So create an actual strategy that you put into your trading strategy that actually looks at resolving the conflict, whether it be I'm going to stop trading, or I'm going to take these steps, and then if that doesn't work, I'm going to stop trading. work through conflict. So look at conflict that you can resolve in any part of your life and consciously see how you are actually working through that conflict, because awareness is the key. And make sure that the strategy you have is relevant to you. When you can ask yourself, why am I doing this? Why does it matter? And how does that help me? How can I adjust this to suit me and what I want? That's when it's something that you should be using. When it's not, you need to look at why not. And don't be afraid to create new ideas and conclusions. Investigate. Again, the news. There are so many things in the news. It's like, I actually call, it's a different type of trading. Now, we sort of look at micro trading or macro trading, but it's like a middle, like a meso trading, where you can have a macro narrative and story on a micro trade. It's a huge story, like with United Health. That was a huge story, and it was only related to them, but the story was huge that spread through so many different areas that, again, my 17-year-old actually picked the actual drop in the stock. And I mean, I'm sure she listens and hears some degree of things that we talk about, but I don't think she listens that much. So, and yeah, again, if anyone's interested, I'm happy to explain her logic, how a 17-year-old came up with all of this. But yeah, it was pretty amazing that something like that came from somebody who wasn't a trader. And I think that that is something that is really significant that we're not looking at now, is that we're learning about trading. We're doing a lot of things from old school, but we're in a world where social media is such a big influence, and it's not just an influence on traders, but it's an influence on the consumer market, which then influences how much faith and the sentiment of the market. How much does a person have that faith in that particular product or that particular organization, or where do we stand in that? Now that there's social media around, there's so much more influence in a different level that there was before, and we really need to take that into account to move forward. So, but thank you, everyone. Anyway, does anyone have any questions?
This is brilliant stuff. Please ask questions to Katie, please. Ask any question she is capable of.
It would be good to see your daughter's point of view on the United Health.
Absolutely.
It's crazy. It wasn't until I actually saw it on television I went, oh my God, that's crazy. She saw that. So, okay, is anyone else interested, or because I can always just talk to Marty and that about it at a later time. Anyone else interested?
Yeah, I'd like to hear it.
So this actually comes from TikTok and various social media. So apparently, well, did anyone hear about the assassination of the CEO of United Healthcare?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep. So it was actually, so it wasn't necessarily that in itself that actually created the big issue, because nobody really cared about that. Well, nobody non-trading cared about that. But the finding of the bullets that actually had deny, defend, depose, all of a sudden that became a big issue. that was huge, because then all of a sudden that became, it's like a vigilante type thing. It's like the system let everyone down and he took it in, like, things into his own hands. So he did the right thing. And there's so many people that have been having difficulties with health insurance companies in America that everyone really connected with that. It doesn't help that apparently this guy is really good looking. So apparently that's something that actually gets mentioned a lot. So from that, she actually went down the track of, because of that, and he was on his way to the meeting, the stockholders meeting, or that because of all of the publicity, all of the things that actually came from that stocks were instantly going to drop, which they did. I think they went from 610 down to about 510, pretty much straight away, which you would expect because the CEO was killed. Either way, you would expect that to happen. Then she actually assumed, because of the public and the way the public were, that investors would then lose faith in the company, and then they would actually start to drop it again. Her belief is that membership to them would actually drop, and that people would actually start to sue them because they weren't actually paying out what they were supposed to be paying out. They would have additional scrutiny by the government because all of a sudden everyone's crying out that something needs to be done about it, which would then increase their claims that they actually had to pay out. As far as I'm aware, there has been a lot of lawsuits since then. And yes, it is extremely logical, extremely logical. And I look at it and go, why didn't I see that? Then she came up with the conclusion, well, if they actually didn't change what they said that their projected earnings would be, then wouldn't people actually be upset because they didn't actually do that? And then wouldn't people who actually weren't paying attention be suing them because it was a misrepresentation? And apparently that is actually occurring now. It has continued through that she has predicted, and keep in mind, this is a 17-year-old, that since the claims, yes, claims are actually increasing, so their profits are reducing, their membership will increase, because it doesn't matter whether a person wants to claim or thinks that they will claim. They want somebody who thinks they feel will, because they're being regulated. She feels within the next 24 months, next 2 years, that they will actually increase back to the 600 mark, because everyone has now turned their focus to the government and their treatment of Luigi, not the company itself anymore. I think I've got all that right.
Thank you so much, Kerry. Really appreciate your contribution. It is tremendous for all of us. Any last questions to Marty or Kerry or to self? If not, thank you very much. Before we go, last announcement is probably NP Financial should be greatly affiliating with the world's #1 prop trading firm, which will be announced in next week. So we, as you know, from 2019 to 2024, we run our own proprietary prop trading firm, offering $25,000 to $1 million. But due to regulatory changes, we have to stop. We did stop, but we are not stoppable. So what we did, we are doing actually, we are going for an affiliation with the #1 in prop trading firm. So you won't have any problem or much problem in prop trading space as well. So wish you all the best for the new month, which I think is June month would be all good, because as they say, but never have, maybe 50-50, sell in May and run away. No one sold in May and run away. So that was fantastic. If you go and study in a yearly chart, you will come to know you need not sell in May and go away. So if nothing happened in May, we may expect something in June, but never expect anything. Only follow market, and we'll be all fine. With that, we thank you all of you for your great contribution, and have a good month of trading. Thank you. Bye for now.
Thanks.
Goodbye.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.